This is Mrs. Waynard's Math Class, Chapter 10, Lesson 10.7b, Part 11, Elapsed Time, Finding an End Time. Today's learning target: by the end of today's lesson, you should confidently be able to say, I can find an end time when given a start time and the elapsed time. But what does this mean? Well, let's look at some vocabulary. Here's my vocabulary for today's lesson and the next few lessons. First thing we have is start time. Start time is the time that something begins or starts at. It's a time on a clock. So example, I began riding my bike at 9:15 a.m. 9:15 a.m. is a start time. 9:15 is a time we would see on a clock, and that's the time we began or we started riding. So that's our start time. Next, let's focus in on end time. End time is the time that something finishes or ends at. It's also a time on a clock. Example, I finished riding my bike at 12:36 p.m. 12:36 p.m. is the end time. That's when I finished or stopped riding. And again, 12:36 is the time we would see on a clock. Finally, let's focus in on elapsed time. Elapsed time is the time that it takes for something to happen. It's an hours and minutes type of time, not a clock time. So for example, I rode my bike for 3 hours and 16 minutes. 3 hours and 16 minutes is the elapsed time. It's the amount of time that I did the thing for, or the amount of time that I was riding my bike. And 3 hours and 16 minutes is not a time you'd see on a clock. It's just an amount of hours and an amount of minutes. So that's my elapsed time. For today's lesson, I will be given a start time. We'll know what time the person started doing something. I will be given the elapsed time. We'll know how long they did it for. And what I'm going to need to find out is the end time. What's the exact clock time that they finished at? Let's take a look at example number 1. Logan spent 3 hours and 42 minutes working on the computer. If Logan started working at 10:32 a.m., what time did Logan stop working? As always, let's go back and see what the question is asking me. The actual question is, what time did Logan stop working? Stop working means when did he end, so this is going to be the end time. That's what they're asking me. Let's go back into the question and see what I know. I know that Logan spent 3 hours and 42 minutes working on the computer. So 3 hours and 42 minutes is a time that's hours and minutes, and it's how long he was doing something. That's going to be the elapsed time. I also know that Logan started working at 10:32 a.m. And if that's when he started working, this will be the start time. So I'm going to take the start time, which they give me, with the elapsed time, which they also give me, and I will find out what the end time is. That's how I'll solve this problem. Let's move to the next page and see how to do this. For start time, end time, and elapsed time problems, I'm always going to separate my page into 3 columns. My first column will be labeled H for hours. My middle column will be labeled 10M for 10 minutes. My right column will be labeled 1M for 1 minute. I know that Logan started at 10:32 a.m., so I'm going to put that under my first column, 10:32 a.m., and I'm going to underline it. The first number that I write down in each column must be underlined. You'll see why. I know how long Logan worked for. She worked for 3 hours and 42 minutes. 42 broken up is 40 and 2. 40 is in the tens column, and the 2 is in the ones column. So I'm going to go ahead and start my first column, which is my hours column, and since it's labeled hours, I'll be counting by hours. I know that she worked for 3 hours, so I'm going to label 3 spaces. 1, 2, 3. That's for my 3 hours. Now I'm going to simply count by hours and rewrite the new time as I go. It is important because AM and PM may change. Even though it's annoying, it is important to continuously write the AM or PM as you go. So, I start at 10:32 a.m. 1 hour later would be 11:32 a.m. 1 hour after that would be 12:32. Oh, but as soon as I get to a 12, we know that we switch the AM or PM. So since this is 12, instead of being AM, this tells me now I'll need to switch. So it would be 12:32 p.m. because we always switch the AM or PM at the 12. 1 hour after 12:32 p.m. would be 1:32 p.m. Okay, so that's my 3 hours. Now, I need to take that last time, which is the 1:32 p.m., and I'm going to bring that up to the top of my next column. I'll write it down and I'll underline it because I always have to underline the starting time in a column. The reason I underline it is because it's a starting time and I don't count that time when I'm counting my hours or minutes. Now, I know that she worked for 40 minutes. So I'm going to count by tens to get to the 40 minutes. 10 minutes, 20 minutes, 30 minutes, 40 minutes. And that's how many spaces I need to fill up. I'm in the 10-minute column, so I'm going to count by 10 minutes. So 1:32 plus 10 minutes would be 1:42 p.m. 1:42 plus another 10 minutes would be 1:52 p.m. Plus another 10 minutes would be 1:62. Oh, I can't say 62, because remember, every 60 minutes is an hour. The most minutes I can go up to is 59, then it turns to the next hour. So 60 is never good in the minutes. I'm going to change that to 2:02, right? Instead of 1:62, it would be the next hour, which is 2:02 p.m. 10 minutes after 2:02 would be 2:12 p.m. So I've counted all of my 40 minutes. I'm going to take that last time, which is the 2:12 p.m., move that up to my next column and underline it, because that's just my start. It's not one of the numbers I'm counting. And I know that I have 2 individual single minutes here, so I'm going to label them 1, 2. Okay, take my 2:12. 2:12 p.m. plus 1 minute is 2:13 p.m. plus 1 minute is 2:14 p.m. That's it. Now I've finished. So this is 2:14 p.m. That's the time that Logan finished. So when I go back to the original problem, the question says, what time did Logan stop working? So my answer will be, Logan stopped working at 2:14 p.m. And notice in my question, the time they gave me had an AM or PM. It was AM. So my answer has to then have the correct AM or PM, and in this case it wound up being PM in it. If I just said Logan stopped working at 2:14, that would be incorrect because my question had an AM or PM, so it must be included. Therefore, that's my final answer. Logan stopped working at 2:14 p.m. Please stop the video and complete worksheet number 1 right now. Follow the same format that you learned in this lesson by separating your page into 3 columns. Go back and follow it with me step by step from this lesson. That's the work that we'll be looking for when we check for your complete answer and correct work. So here's another way you'll see these examples. Example 2, start time, 10:40 p.m. Elapsed time, 4 hours, 36 minutes. End time, blank. We need to figure out the end time. Okay, well, we're going to follow the same format of the 3 columns. So I'll draw my 3 columns. I'll label the first column H for hours, the next column 10M for 10 minutes, and the final column 1M for 1 minute. I know that the elapsed time is 4 hours and 36 minutes. So I'll label that right on the top so I know where I'm going. I know that my start time that they told me was 10:40 p.m. I always underline the first time. So now I need to figure out 4 hours from there. I'll put my numbers 1, 2, 3, 4. And let's count by hours. 1 hour after 10:40 p.m. would be 11:40 p.m. 1 hour after 11:40 p.m. would be 12:40. But 12 means I have to change to the opposite AM or PM. This was PM, so I'm flipping it to AM. So that's going to be 12:40 AM. At the 12, I always change. 1 hour after 12:40 AM would be 1:40 AM. 1 hour after 1:40 AM would be 2:40 AM. So I'm done with my 4 hours. Take that last time, transfer it up to the next column, and underline it. Now I need 30 minutes, so I'm going to number them 10, 20, 2:30. Remember, this is my 10-minute column, so I'll be counting by 10 minutes. 10 minutes after 2:40 is 2:50 a.m. After 2:50 would be 2:60. But 60. I can't have that, so I have to change to the next hour. So instead that would be 3 o'clock a.m. 10 minutes after 3 o'clock a.m. would be 3:10 a.m. So I'm finished with my 30 minutes. Take that time, transfer it up to my next column, 3:10 a.m., and I'll underline it. I know that there are 6 minutes that I have in this column, so I'll number them 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Okay, this is the 1-minute column. So 1 minute after 3:10 a.m. would be 3:11 a.m. 1 minute after 3:11 a.m. would be 3:12 a.m. 1 minute after that would be 3:13 a.m. 1 minute after that is 3:14 a.m. 1 minute after that, 3:15 a.m. 1 minute after that, 3:16 a.m. So I've finished all of my 6 minutes. I know that my end time is 3:16 a.m. So go back to my original question and write in my answer. The end time is 3:16 a.m. And that's my final answer. Please stop the video and complete worksheet number 2 right now. So let's review. When given a start time and an elapsed time and asked to find the end time, here's how we solve it. We go to a new separate page, we break it into 3 columns, label the first column H for hours, second column 10M for 10-minute segments, and the last column 1M for 1-minute segments. We take the start time and write it in our first column, including the AM or PM, and we underline it. We take the elapsed time and break it up into hours, there was 3, 10-minute segments, there were 40, and 1-minute segments, there were 2, because 42 separates into 40 and 2. We go back to the hour column, and whatever number we wrote down, that's how many numbers we write with a dash next to it. We had 3, so we write down 1, 2, 3. And then we simply count by hours, remembering to include the AM or PM, and remembering that anytime we get to a 12, we need to switch to the opposite AM or PM. Once we finish all of those numbers, we take that time, move it up to the new column, write it down, and underline it, because we always underline the starting column. Once we're in the 10-minute column, we count by tens up to the number that we wrote down. So here I wrote down 40. I'll count by tens till I get to 40. Notice I put a dash after each number. Once we've done that, we go ahead and count by our 10-minute segments, remembering to include the AM and the PM. As we move down, remember that anytime we get to a 60 minutes, we can't have a 60 minutes, so we have to cross it out and we change it to the next hour. Once we finish all of those times, we take our last time, bring it up to the 1-minute column, write it down and underline it, since we always underline the first time. And whatever number we have written there, that's how many numbers we write down with our dash after it. And then we add minute by minute as we go. This example doesn't show it, but once you get to a 60 minutes, you would change that to the next o'clock hour. Your final number listed down is your final end time, and you can go back and put that into your final answer. If you follow these steps every single time, you will get the right answer. Elapsed time is one of those things that when you follow the steps, although it's time consuming, it makes it very easy. But very frequently, these are problems that students and even adults get wrong because it's very easy to make a mistake. So following this format is what we need you to do, as the format does work. Hopefully by now you can confidently say, I can find an end time when given a start time and the elapsed time. As always, we will be doing more practice in class, so work with it, take your time with it, follow the steps, and if you have any questions or concerns, see a teacher. We will help you with it. Good luck with this lesson.